Meeting about housing, reminded that it's a form of response to God. Let's enter this place of worship with the sun coming through this morning with a song of praise. And let's practice it so that by the time they come in, they'll all be saying, wow. I think many people in here know the song. So we'll start just singing the melody together. Come all ye people, come and praise your Maker. Come all ye people, come and praise your Maker. Come all ye people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. That's the second part. So if we could get this group singing, come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Richard, could you lead the melody?
I'll do that.
All right. Would you stand and lead it from there? So. You don't have to come over.
Part one.
Yeah, you're fine. And our part is this again. Come all you people. No, is that how I did it? Yeah.
Yep.
Come all you people. Come and praise your Maker. Come all you people. Come and praise your Maker. Come all you people. Come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Ready?
Come all you
people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Have a spirit, and we'll do melody and harmony with come and praise your Spirit. Come all you people. Sorry, I messed it up.
You ready? Come all you
people, come and praise the Spirit. Come all you people, come and praise the Spirit. Come all you people, come and praise the Spirit. Come now and worship the Lord. Amen. I want to welcome you today to this opportunity to talk about churches and affordable housing. I wanted to even call the conference something different because I've learned that affordable housing is not a word that's in vogue anymore, but it's a word that I think we all understood. I'd like to call it churches and permanent supportive housing, or churches and supportive housing, and you'll hear more about those words today through the various speakers. When I was first asked to put something together for this morning, I saw it as really an incredible opportunity because, as most of you know, the Reformed Church of Highland Park has had this incredible experience of building housing on the church roof. And so I put out a few calls. I called, I think, 6 or 7 people, hoping that maybe I could get somebody to come out on Saturday morning and to speak with us. And everybody that I called said yes. So we have an incredible opportunity to hear from the whole gamut of people that can make it possible for churches in our region, Reformed churches and other churches, to do real projects, new development or acquisition or any sort of thing that could help make life easier in terms of housing for the neediest people in our society. So I'd like to start with prayer before we begin the meeting. God, I'm thankful to be surrounded by people who are thankful, by people who recognize that every day is a gift, that the light of the day is a gift, that the dark of the night is a gift, that chances to be together, those are gifts from you. I find, God, that living with people who are recipients of grace and who know it, we become people who are able to respond to you and to pass grace along. So this morning I pray that you'll help us to consider if there are ways that we can pass your grace along through creating with you housing opportunities for those who have not been able to be warm, not been able to live without constantly moving from one couch to the other. Children who are constantly changing schools because some relative gets tired of their family living in the living room. God, we want to be with all these people and to share your love in tangible ways. I pray that what we learned this morning might be part of our process in considering what you might have for us. Amen. To start the morning, I just want to briefly say who it is that you'll be hearing from today. So I'll just take a moment to do introductions. And then I'll ask each person, when it's your turn, just to come up and to take the seat up here and to lead your portion. Each person, after they speak, there will be time for questions directed directly at them and the topic they bring up. Because we have so many speakers, I'll ask each speaker if a question comes to you that you anticipate will be answered better by somebody down the road, just kind of pass that along, and I'll keep a list of what the questions are so that we don't spend a lot of time on the front end answering questions that somebody else's presentation might reveal the answer to. But our first speaker today, after I give a brief introduction here, will be Allison Recca Ryan, who's the New Jersey Director of the Corporation for Supportive Housing. Where'd Allison go? There she is. Allison, welcome. Thank you so much. And Corporation for Supportive Housing, she'll tell you, but it's nationwide. Was it 35 states or something?
Well, we have offices in 15 states, but we do business in all states.
Oh, you do in all states. Okay, great. And then we have Pam McCrory, who's the Director of Supportive Housing and Special Needs, and I know her as the person in charge of the Special Needs Trust Fund. So this is Pam right up here. Welcome, Pam. She's at HMFA. I should have said that. Then we have Bruce Davidson, who's the Director of the Lutheran Office of Governmental Ministries. Bruce, where are you? Is he out in back still? Okay. Okay. Bridget Kennedy, who's the Director of Social Work Services at Middlesex Department of Human Services. Right here. Welcome, Bridget. And then we have Bob Gauthier. I said it right. There was a question about who was going to be coming today. So on your sheet it says staff from University Behavioral Health Care. That's Bob. And he'll be talking about support services and the ways that if a church builds housing, it doesn't suddenly have to become a licensed social service agency to make this happen. You have partners, and Bob will talk about that. And then we have Peg. And Peg, is it Busey? Am I saying it right? Where's Peg?
She's with Bruce.
Oh, she's with Bruce. In fact, I think I pronounced it right, but in case I didn't, she'll get it right. She's the Vice President for Housing and Community Services for Lutheran Social. Is it Lutheran Social Ministries? And then we have Father Jeff Putoff, and he's the Executive Director of HopeWorks. Welcome, Father Jeff, which is a ministry in Camden. And then you've got me, but I won't say anything at the end. I'm going to say what I'm going to say right now in about 4 minutes. So, I've thought a lot about why it is that I feel so strongly that churches should be doing more than we are currently with affordable housing. And so I've just put together a thing I call the 11 reasons why permanent supportive housing may work well for your congregation. And I'm just going to read through these. And I think that I'll just leave it at that. First, churches have a mandate to do justice. Built into the meaning of what it means to be a church is the call to do justice and love kindness. Churches are supposed to care particularly for those who have been wronged by the world or left out. And these are going to go, some of them are theological and some are insanely practical. Here comes one of those. Number 2, churches have prime property. Property is hard to come by in New Jersey. Really nice property in the middle of a safe, well-lit, desirable town is particularly hard to come by. And many of the churches in our classes are on ideal property, a place that would be safe for people who haven't had safe housing before. Number 3, churches are good at partnerships. When I look at the type of justice ministries that most of our churches engage in most fully, we're not running the whole show. We have other things that are important to us, like creating important Sunday morning worship and educational ministries and pastoral care ministries. If we do social justice ministry, it's because we've teamed up with an Elijah's Promise, or we've teamed up with some agency that does it well. So we're good at partnerships, and partnerships are really important to permanent supportive housing. 4, churches have a shared goal but diverse gifts that are voluntarily shared with the whole. So we have one goal of worshiping God and connecting with our neighbors. But we, because of the volunteer at the Reformed Church of Highland Park, we have that shared goal, but we all have different gifts that we bring to the table. We were able to develop Arena Court with very few soft costs because of a lawyer who gave his services for free for the whole project. To have a budget for a project and have 0 next to the legal fees is not something that HMFA or any other funder is used to. We had an interior decorator. We had the ability of the church to do a fundraiser, a registry, like a wedding registry, to outfit the apartments. So these sorts of things, we have diverse gifts as a church that we can share to make projects work. Churches are compassionate communities. Most of the reasons why affordable housing doesn't happen, at least as I understand it, beyond the financial issues, there's the NIMBY reality, not in my backyard. But we're a YIMBY reality, yes in my backyard, or yes on my roof. I mean, it's built into us to say this is where you belong. And that can completely change whether a project happens or doesn't happen. When 300 people show up at the zoning board meeting and say yes, it's a very different experience for a town. And those 6 loud voices who say no, that used to feel like 600, they sound like 6 again. So, churches are voluntary friends. For a lot of people in supportive housing, they've had lots of paid professionals in their lives. Lots of people who, and it's a good thing, they've needed them. But when you haven't just had friends who are your friends to be your friends, it's something you lack. And I think that's something that churches can offer, is just, good neighbors and people who want to get to know you and they don't have anything to gain by it. It's just want to be your friend. Churches with housing on their property will provide ongoing support. Sometimes when you do a new thing, there's a lot of attention around it. You've got your grand opening and your ribbon cutting and a lot of attention, that the construction, every kid in our neighborhood wants to see the bulldozers, that kind of thing. Then the work finishes and people move in and you forget. But it's different if you're in a church and you're putting housing directly on your roof or in your yard, and when you meet and during your prayer times you say, prayers today for the residents at Arena Court that they find jobs. Or when somebody during announcements says, such and such a young woman is looking for a job working with children. If anybody in the church has an idea, let us know. So that ongoing support and ongoing friendship is something that churches offer. One of these sounds kind of like another, so instead of calling it 11 reasons, I'll just call it 10 and skip that one. So 10's easier anyway. Church facilities are exciting community centers. This may not be the case for every church right now, but I think it's probably the case for lots of our churches, that many things happen in the building. Many people pass through your doors, and all of those, that life that happens around a congregation can be something that folks in supportive housing benefit from being around. So there's a program for youth after school in our church basement, and now some of the residents of Arena Court, our housing complex, come down and they help out. That kind of thing. There's those sorts of opportunities. Or there's a Bible study and we needed a child care worker, and somebody suddenly gets a job because there's a Bible study. That kind of thing. Churches are located in town. I've already said the thing about prime real estate, but just one more thing about that. A lot of the affordable housing that I knew about, at least in our area, has been developed in unlit areas, places where public transportation doesn't pass, and things like that, because the property's been available. It's cheaper out there. That kind of things. That kind of a thing. All the things that make Highland Park, the town where we live, desirable for anyone else are reasons why it would be desirable for folks in supportive housing. And I know that's the case with many of your churches, too. So, then the final thing is churches have lots of meetings, and that's a positive, actually. For starters, you'd quit any committee that told you you were expected to meet 52 times a year. And which is that's just the starting point. That's just, worshiping together. We're 52 times a year. And then, join other committees and stuff. But the neat thing about our meetings is our meetings are mainly about recharging and reminding you that it's not all up to you, and reminding you that, life is a gift and that we have gifts to give others. So the type of meetings that are part of our organization are the kind of meetings that inspire us to do the work of supportive housing. So those are just my thoughts on why this is relevant for hopefully everybody here. And I'm going to step away and let the experts now do their part. Thank you. Allison? Everybody could hear me fine, but if you can't hear, just go ahead and use the mic if you're comfortable with it, okay?
Sure. It's always nice to follow Seth, because Seth sounds so inspirational, and I'm going to come up here and give you lots of dry facts and some little information. Seth spoke about supportive housing, but I really wanted to start the context to give you an overview of homelessness and what some of the numbers are. Many of you, hopefully some of you participated, but most of you have probably been reading the press articles from last week. Last Wednesday, New Jersey had a point-in-time count of the homeless. And we do this every 2 years officially by HUD. And it looks at, basically what we do is we go out into the community, and every county pulls together, it's an incredible amount of work. They pull together a great resource team of volunteers who go out on the street, who go to the shelters, who go to what's called Project Homeless Connects, where services are available, and literally do surveys with every individual and family who is homeless that they can find. Our last official count was in 2007. New Jersey has done a count every year, but the numbers I'm going to talk about today are from 2007 because it's the last count that we had where everybody participated. And as I talked about how the counties and the communities and the providers do an incredible job of getting volunteers out there, and we just had last Wednesday, it was one of the coldest nights, it was in the teens, and people were out on the street at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, going into the woods and train stations and under bridges looking for people. You can imagine having to do that every year and getting people together. So we don't have those numbers yet, but from 2007 when we did the count, we counted just about 13,000 adults who were homeless. And we added to that another almost 4,700 children. So it's just upwards of 18,000, just below 18,000 people that were homeless on the street at our last point in time count. We also know that from all the research that has been done, it's a staggering statistic, but there are actually 2 to 3 times as many people who are homeless than we've been able to count. So that tells us that on any given night, there are 50,000 people in the state of New Jersey with no place to call home. Some of those individuals are in our shelters. Some are couch surfing from place to place. On a really cold evening, they may be lucky enough that a family member or a friend will say to them, okay, you can stay here just this one night, but come morning, you're back out on the street. So what we've done here, and if you didn't pick up in the other room on the table, there's some papers you can pick up. One of them is pulled from the 2007 report, and it gives you a breakdown of all the counties and the numbers of homeless that were counted in 2007. It's going to be interesting for this count this year because we anticipate that the numbers are going to be higher. We've been hearing from our shelters that more people are showing up at the shelters. We also know that there's a 40% increase in the amount of people applying for food stamps. But the other thing was, it was a frigid night. So we anticipate two things may happen. One is we may see more people who are actually in the shelters that evening. And the other is we may actually count less because people took people in just for the night. So we're not going to capture those people. The thing that's also going to be different this year, and we got a lot more press coverage this year, and the press coverage was actually more positive. I don't know if you've ever read the articles online, but people can post comments after them. And if you make the mistake of reading the comments, you can't believe what people will say. And there were terrible comments again this year, everything from putting pins in people's like tags in people's ears to, that you'd be able to count who the homeless were, or that you can always find the homeless because of the smell. I mean, it was horrible. But I will say there were more positive comments this year. They didn't outweigh the negative comments, but there were more positive comments than we've ever read before. And I think it's really because people are seeing that their family members, their neighbors, are now in that, either about to be homeless or become homeless. They've lost their home through foreclosure. They're going to the food banks, things people have never done before. So I think the tide is starting to change on what people think about homelessness. So you can pick up this paper. The average profile of a homeless person in New Jersey is about 47 years old, male, African American, but we see it straight across. We don't see homelessness not touch any population. In our last count, about 34% of the people we counted as homeless were those who were chronically homeless or the long-term homeless. That means people who have been without a stable place to live for over a year, or they've been homeless at least 4 times in the past 3 years. A chronically homeless person is an individual, but we were able to confirm that there are families out there who meet the same definition, who have been homeless for that length of time and all need housing. So if you pick this paper up, it'll also give you just some information about where people's sources of income come from who are homeless. And the thing that you'll notice from that is about 40% are getting food stamps. Probably 90%, if not 100%, would qualify for food stamps. So that people who are homeless are really not getting the resources they need. And oftentimes, it's because they have no address. So without housing, you don't have an address. You have no place for your mail to go to. If you go to apply for benefits, they say you have to have an address. They have no identification. They've been on the streets for so long. They have nothing. And it's been much more difficult since 9/11 for people to even get the documentation. They have nothing to back up getting a birth certificate or anything else. So those are issues that we see. One of the things that people have looked at and we're working with groups on is the idea of creating supportive housing to address the homelessness issue. I'm going to talk a little bit about supportive housing as well as Housing First, which is one model of supportive housing. In the past, and we still continue to do this, we've looked at people and said, you know what, you've been homeless, let's get you into a shelter, and then we'll take you from that shelter and we'll move you into a transitional housing program where we will teach you all the skills you need to live independently. We'll teach you how to take care of your apartment. If you're drinking or using drugs, we're going to get you off those drugs, we'll get you into counseling. And when we think you have met all of the guidelines of what it takes to live in your own place, and you're now deserving of your own place, we will graduate you, and we actually use that term. will graduate you from transitional housing and have you move into permanent housing. Well, in reality, what happens is people have finished their time in transitional housing, which happens to be about 18 months. And that isn't because in 18 months you're magically cured. It's because the funding runs out in 18 months. And now we tell you you've graduated, and there's no rental subsidies for you oftentimes to move into your own place. So what happens is you enter the whole homeless cycle again. The idea of supportive housing is to give people the opportunity to move into permanent housing with services. Because if you just put someone in housing, whether they have the skills or not, if they don't have all of those supportive services to feel safe and to have stable housing, they don't succeed. So permanent supportive housing is housing that is lease-based. People have their own lease for their apartment, so it's not that, well, I lost my job, or I'm feeling depressed and can't go to work, or I'm not keeping my room clean, and the person who's doing the housing says, you're no longer meeting our eligibility criteria, you're out. And what happens when they do that is people become homeless again. So it's lease-based housing, just like you or I would have a place in the community, but we have all those wraparound services in place. Ideally, it's more independent housing, so people have their own units of housing. That does not mean that some of the supportive housing that has been developed and will continue to be developed is of a shared housing model, where you may have a single-family home and 3 people sharing that home by choice. One of the things that's really important is we have choice every day in our lives where we live. Just because someone has been homeless, and when we talk about homeless and supportive housing, we're really talking about individuals and or families who are homeless, who are youth who are aging out of the foster care system, or homeless youth who are on the street, people who have mental health histories, people who may have substance abuse histories, domestic violence, anything that really needs more than just affordable housing. It needs those wraparound services. So in supportive housing, you have the units that are available for people. They're safe, they're affordable, they have those supportive services. You can do, as we said, individual units, or some are shared housing. One of the things, if you're looking to do supportive housing, that we encourage is that you hold focus groups with people who are going to be your potential tenants. Because as I was saying earlier, just as you want choice as to where you live, people that are going to go into housing also deserve that choice. And we hear 2 very different things. And that's why, depending on what you're hearing from your group, really helps you frame what type of housing you develop. One of the things that we've learned over the years is we can't say this is the best housing and this is all the things we're going to put in place. We also need to hear from the people who are going to live there what it is they want, what hasn't worked for them in the past, and what it's going to take for them to succeed. We do see a group of individuals, oftentimes those who are coming out of foster care or homeless youth, as well as some mental health, who say, I don't want to live in my own apartment. I want to live in something where I share a house with other people because I haven't had family. I don't have any other family to go to, and this sort of creates for them a new sense of family. And as Seth was talking about earlier with the church congregations, it's the same kind of thing, to have that whole support around you. And for youth, and particularly, it's also an opportunity to learn from each other and develop those friendships, things they haven't done in the past. You'll also hear the term, I'm trying to be conscious of the time here because I can talk forever, housing first. And the thing is, with supportive housing, the people that are doing supportive housing oftentimes set up a lot of criteria to be eligible to enter that supportive housing. So there's things like, because people want people to succeed, and also because people are used to doing things differently. So oftentimes, in order to get into supportive housing, you have to have a certain amount of sobriety time. They're not going to consider taking anyone who hasn't been there clean for at least 90 days or longer. You know, they look at things like credit risk sometimes, all the things that can be impediments to getting housing. When you do supportive housing, it is for those who have, you know, barriers to stability, and also because we're talking about, you know, when Seth talked about affordable housing, we're talking about, and I believe Middlesex actually had a group, we're talking about really affordable housing. Affordable housing isn't affordable to those that we're serving.
That's right.
So that when you're talking about things like leases, in supportive housing, no one pays more than 30% of their income towards rent. It's the same as if you had a Section 8 voucher. The difference is that project may not have a Section 8 voucher. So that's one of the things you have to look at and how you're going to manage it, because we never expect anyone to pay more than 30% of their income. But as we said, there are oftentimes eligibility criteria. Housing First is a model that was developed for those who really are the hardest to engage and the hardest to get into housing. It was designed for people who are the long-term homeless, those people we talked about who are chronically homeless, who are on the street for more than a year, and who have issues, active mental health issues, who have active substance abuse issues. They're people who cost our system incredible amounts of money. The chronically homeless are about 10% of the entire homeless population, but they incur 50% of the costs that are spent on that group of people. There was an article a few years ago in Atlantic Monthly on $1 Million Murray, and they followed one person and all of the services that he used, the emergency rooms, you know, emergency shelters, the jail, and in 1 year, it was $1 million in services. And when we talk about the cost, we can't forget that it's not only the dollars, but the cost to human lives. And these are people who, as we said, continually cycle. You know, they're going to our shelters and they're coming out of our shelters and they're going into our local hospitals. And when the hospitals discharge them, they go back into a shelter. And then they get arrested because they're on the streets, vagrancy, and they end up in our jails. And when they need medical treatment, they go to our emergency rooms. And this is all the things that supportive housing or Housing First wants to address, getting people hooked up to the mainstream services. So it creates an overall cost savings and cost shifting for the states and the counties and the communities, but it's also a great savings in the person's life and their quality of life. So Housing First is really developed for those who are chronically homeless with multiple barriers. It's intended to be a very low threshold to get into Housing First. The idea is that you take somebody literally off the street or directly from a shelter and get them into housing immediately, and then provide all those wraparound services somebody needs to maintain that housing. What research has shown is that when we get someone into housing immediately, even if they're actively drinking or they've been a homeless youth that's been living on the street for 2 years. And I want to say one thing about youth. We have seen, and Seth's got a project that's dealing with youth, we have seen an enormous, I think one of our studies showed that of those who were long-term homeless, something like 26% of them had previously been in the foster care system at some point in their lives. So we don't do a very good job of, when someone finishes foster care, they reach 18 and they're done, getting into housing. We've also seen that we have a very motivated group of youth. Pam and I had been in East Orange at one point and meeting with somebody, and they had literally about 50 youth who were living in abandoned buildings in the city of East Orange, and they were going to school every day on their own, and they would go back to an abandoned building that night. So we really want to, look at the strengths that people have and be able to do something to help them succeed. So in Housing First, it's getting people in quickly, providing all those wraparound services. Services are available in supportive housing as well as in Housing First to everyone that lives there, but they're not mandated. So someone's lease is never contingent on them taking those services. That is not to say that services aren't necessary. It's called supportive housing and Housing First because the only way it works is if you deliver those services. And whether you deliver them from your own team in-house, whether you make sure they're hooked up with all the community services, it needs to be services that work for that individual and that services that that individual is comfortable in receiving. It also means that on Wednesday, when someone comes into Arena Court to meet with someone, and that person says to them, you know what, I've been here 8 months, I don't want to see you, I don't want you in my face, I just want to go about doing what I want to do. That we don't say, okay, you need to move out. That means that you say, okay, I'm going to give you your space, but that was Wednesday. This is now Friday. It doesn't mean I'm going to not show up at your apartment on Friday and try and engage you again. I think one of the differences that we're struggling with as we do Housing First, and we have a number of initiatives now throughout the state, is that it's a different way of doing business for the providers, the people that are providing those services. It means going out to where the people live rather than people coming into your office to get those services. It means you're used to sitting down with someone in your office and saying, okay, let's go over what your goals were, what have you accomplished this week, you know, how do we get you to do the next step? And it may mean that the services this week are going to that individual's apartment and saying, let's go out for lunch and go to a movie to start building up the trust. An interesting story in Housing First, and it's really, I think, one of the reasons, and then my time is over, I know, is we work with somebody who did a project in Connecticut. And they have a Housing First project, and they took people literally off the street. Got them into housing, because they have to have, in order to do that, you need to have housing available. And there's a PowerPoint back there in the other room, if you didn't pick up, that goes into much more detail on all of this. I just wanted to sort of give you an overview today. And they got this woman who had a mental health history, gave her own apartment. She stayed there the first night. And by the second night, she was sort of in the apartment, but it wasn't always coming back. She didn't come back for a while, and then she'd show up. And they started to notice that she was never at the apartment at night. And one of the providers, who was a traditional provider, said, you know what, she should lose this housing. She doesn't spend her time here. She's obviously on the street. You know, she must be being a sex worker, whatever. She doesn't really deserve this place to live. And as people sat down and really met with her and talked with her, this was a woman who had been living on the street for over 10 years. She got her own apartment, and she didn't know how to deal with the independence and being alone, and when that door closed, there was nobody else around. And she felt much more comfortable out on the street where she knew how to deal with that situation. So what they did was, because the idea is to keep people in housing and to work with people at their own pace, was they ended up taking the door off of her apartment. This was in a building that was not all supportive housing. But as soon as they took that door off, she was much more comfortable, and she knew how to take care of herself in that situation. And 6 months down the road, her door eventually went back on that apartment, and she was comfortable, and she's been there now for about 3 years. But it really is looking at how we do things differently. So as I said, Housing First is really for a population that really is the long-term street homeless with a lot of additional issues. Supportive housing is for people who as well have issues that need addressing, like youth and mental health and substance abuse, but the barriers are not quite as high for them to get into housing. But both, it's the whole idea of the supportive services that are wrapped around the housing. So I'd encourage you to pick up the papers that we have in the other room, which will give you a lot more information, and that we're always available to provide additional assistance. And if you have any questions, so that I can keep this on time.
We'll take one question for Allison now. I would just say CSH is
I didn't say who CSH was.
serves as a consultant to projects. So
At no cost.
At no cost. So that's the neat part here is you'll hear about where the funding comes from and how that happens. But CSH, are you going to want her to say there? Okay. Why don't we actually have Pam go, and then maybe there'll be questions for you two together. That'd be even better. So save your questions. Sorry to take one.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's really nice to see all of your interest and have this opportunity to talk to you. My name is Pam McCrory. I'm the Director of Supported Housing and Special Needs at the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency. One of those acronyms, HMFA. The New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency is a state independent authority. It is of, but not in, or I always get it confused. We are affiliated with the Department of Community Affairs. The Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs is the chairman of our board. We are not on the state budget. We are actually very much like a bank, but we are a public institution, and our charge is to really help New Jersey citizens have access to housing. A significant portion of the agency in our portfolio are single-family homes. Some folks, we're doing a lot of work with organizations around foreclosure and single-family homes throughout the state. We also have a significant part of the agency that works with large multifamily projects and senior projects where we fund those types of housing. And the mission of the agency, as I said...
Microphone, sorry.
Okay, sorry.
You can tell she's never been a preacher.
I know. The mission of the agency is to really help both moderate, low, and very low-income citizens get access to housing. The division that I work with, the Supported Housing and Special Needs, is obviously targeted at very low-income residents of New Jersey. And I want to just pick up on one of the things that Allison talked about and talk about the issue of poverty. Because we have a number of citizens in our state who really do live below the poverty line, significantly below the poverty line. And some of these are populations that I hate to use the word special needs, it's kind of a label, but frankly I haven't come up with a better one and I'm not wasting my time doing that. So we say there are special needs populations. They may be individuals with mental illness, they may be individuals with developmental disabilities. Many of these individuals are on Social Security income. If you're on Social Security income as your only means of support, you're getting about $610, $650 a month. Nobody with that kind of income can afford housing anywhere in New Jersey. So if you're disabled and you're on SSI, you automatically can't get access to housing in New Jersey because you live well below the poverty line. We also talk about homeless populations. Obviously, these are people that are very much below the poverty line, can't access housing. We are targeting youth aging out of the foster care system, youth leaving the juvenile justice system, as well as homeless youth. All of these are also extremely low income populations. Some of the other populations we work with are individuals with AIDS who are also below the poverty line and don't have income supports. And there are some programs that are targeting prisoner reentry. And I was just going to say, we're also working with a number of organizations, and it's a state priority now, to really develop some housing for homeless veterans and disabled veterans. We're targeting both single individual veterans as well as there's an increasing need for veterans who have families for supportive housing. And I think Allison did a really helpful job to put supportive housing in the context of what works. We know from research, we know from a number of programs, primarily from the homeless field, that supportive housing is effective. We know it's not as costly as other forms of almost housing. If you look at institutions, psychiatric hospitals, shelters, jails, these are very costly settings for people. Supportive housing generally, I would say, runs about $30,000 a year with housing and support services. If you're talking about a state psychiatric hospital, it's $120,000. Group homes tend to be about $85,000. I'm just throwing these out really quick to give you some perspective. Shelters, I think we can look at around 60. Is that on there?
In the packet that you can pick up for the PowerPoint, it has all of those graphs and the costs for those kinds of housing.
So the state has really working very hard to develop as much supportive housing as we can throughout the state for a number of populations. We know it's effective, provides good quality of life, and it's a good use of state resources. I think another priority, and Seth kind of alluded to this, is I think we really see supportive housing and housing for special needs as strengthening communities. We need to look at how are we providing assets to our communities rather than, this is not a liability, it's not a NIMBY issue. We're talking about people that are residents of communities, they're members of people's families, they're your neighbors, who are many of the people that are experiencing the challenges that make it impossible for them to get housing. And we see our housing as really being quality quality housing. We're really looking at the design features of our housing. We want the housing that we finance from the trust fund, and I'll get to that in a minute, but the HMFA to be some of the best housing on the block. We want that to be design quality, we want it to be maintained and operated and quality housing, and we want to be sure that the services that are provided to those tenants we're going to help them to really be successful. So we look at housing as strengthening communities. We look at housing as a holistic part of a community. The services are to help there to get treatment services, linkages to entitlements. We're looking at employment, helping people become responsible and self-sufficient and managing their lives in their housing. So that is really kind of the model of housing that we want to support. Supportive permanent housing can take many forms. I think Allison alluded to this. It can be mixed units, apartments in a larger project. We're doing that in a number of places. It can be a single family homes that are shared living. It can be new construction of 18 to 20 units that are all supported housing or mixed housing. We do want to promote integrated housing. We really do want to encourage supportive housing that isn't in a mixed environment. When the HMFA administers the Special Needs Housing Trust Fund. This was created under acting Governor Cody. There was a statewide mental health task force, and in order to meet the needs of populations with serious mental illness, the trust fund was created. It's a $200 million trust fund that we've sold the bonds. The funds have been transferred to the agency. We've been administering this for about 3 years, and to date we've funded almost $100 million worth of projects, probably over 1,000 units, and over 90, I'd say 80 to 90 projects statewide. They're throughout the state in all communities. They're from the suburbs to the inner cities. They are throughout the state and many different models. One of the really exciting things for us is that we're really learning, and there's an opportunity to do creative models. Irena Court is one of our projects. We've got there's a wonderful variety of very creative approaches to creating this kind of housing. I just wanted to also emphasize that when we underwrite as our agency, when we're going to finance through the capital financing, through the trust fund, the development of a project, we're looking at sort of the three important legs of the stool for supportive housing. We're going to look at the capital financing, how feasible this project is in terms of all of the sources. We want to be sure they're all in place. You have enough money to acquire, rehab, or construct new housing. We're also going to underwrite and look at what's your operating source. Do you have some rental assistance? What's your budget long-term to operate that housing? Paying your utilities, paying your insurance, doing the property management and the maintenance. So we're going to look at that budget and make sure that you've got sources so that housing is going to be successful. And then we're also looking at what's the service component. Who's providing the support services to help the individuals be successful? So we're really looking at those three pieces to make sure that the housing is really going to be, to really truly be successful. We work very closely with the Corporation for Supportive Housing, and we provide a great deal of technical assistance, I think, to the projects and folks that come in and work with. We will link you to resources both at the state as well as the local level, and there are resources out there, and we really are interested in working with a lot of organizations. I wanted to, just highlight, we all recognize that we are in an incredibly challenging environmental time, and that creates new challenges as well as new opportunities. And I think, we all need to look at how we deal with them. There are funds available, there are sources available. It's more challenging to find them. It's more challenging to figure out how we make them work. I think one of the great opportunities now is to look at how we partner. And how do organizations create partnerships that are really effective? And we are very much interested in supporting and providing opportunity and to linking prospective projects with folks who could do the supportive services or the property management, that can even maybe do the development. So we really want to help provide partnerships and new ways of doing business. And we will work with organizations to look at how they can either get the capacity or get the technical assistance so that they have the capacity to try and make a project work. So I think those are my comments.
Thank you. Any questions for Pam and Allison?
Very quiet this morning. Father Jeff.
Is the fund growing?
The fund was a fixed fund at the time. It is not growing. It was a 200 million, we have 100 million left. And when we get near the end, there'll have to be discussions at the state level about whether it's possible to renew it or get new funding. You'll love this, because the fund is actually, the debt is paid by the surcharge on bad drivers. So
We encourage everyone.
So we encourage everyone to speed and to, no. Or don't hurt anybody,
Work
but.
with your local police departments, and everybody who's driving through town from out of state, particularly, we want them to, I should say, yeah, we say.
Yeah.
At what point can, whoever's interested in this can engage you? At what phase of the, yeah?
At any point. I think you can contact us.
Let me just repeat the question. At what, Mario's asking, at what point can somebody engage Pam and Allison about a potential project?
At any point. We will discuss the concept. What we really like to do is work with groups. Give us your concept, help you think through what that concept is, link you to the resources that will help you really, put that concept together. What are your potential resources out there and how you can put it together. We like to get involved in projects very early on, as Seth and Father Jeff will tell you, because we want to be there to work with you through your financing sources as well as the design. I want to really emphasize we're very, very interested in design. We have some wonderfully creative projects that have got a lot of great sustainability. We have some wonderful youth projects that have solar, which is, I think, awesome for kids to go live in a housing project that's solar. It's a great learning experience. So we want to be there to work with projects to really help them along the way. We have a technical services division. We have staff architects. We go out, see the site, and we'll work with the project and their architects on the plan. Yes?
I know there's a success story right here with Seth's church, but are there any other success stories in your organizations working with other churches? And can we hear one or two of those?
Well, I can tell you about, there's a project in Asbury Park. It's called the Center in Asbury Park. And it was run by Father Bob Kading. And he was the pastor of a Catholic church, I forget the name of it, in Tinton Falls. And he had started an AIDS center in Asbury Park. And one of the things they saw with all of the consumers who were coming in for services was that housing was the biggest obstacle for people. If you have AIDS and you have certain medication regimes, medications need to be refrigerated, all of that, and when you're living on the streets, it's very difficult to do that. And people were getting sicker than they needed to be. So his vision was to create a permanent housing, independent permanent housing for people that they were serving. And Father Bob had created an environment where many of his church parishioners were volunteering at the center. So they were preparing meals, they were doing meals for people to take home. The agency saw, I think, about 600 or 700 people throughout a course of a year. That was their caseload. They had one paid staff person. Everyone else was volunteers, primarily from the church. And they came to us early on and said, we want to build housing. We have no experience, we have no money. And CSH worked with them and provided technical assistance throughout. HMFA worked with them. They went through zoning and major issues. They built a close to, it's almost $6 million project in Asbury Park that has 25 units of independent housing for people who were homeless and have HIV/AIDS. It also includes a whole new day center and commercial kitchen so they can prepare meals for people in the community. That they do have now 2 other paid staff members who do services, but the church members are totally involved in that project. It never would have worked without the church members. They had an attorney who was one of their church members who did things, their architect. They, held dinner. They did whatever. And without the community, the church community coming together, this never would have worked. And they have an incredible project that's up and operating that is filled to capacity, making a difference in people's lives. So that is another success story.
Did I see a question over here?
No, I just know that people are still having trouble hearing.
Okay, so do use the microphone
Oh.
if you can. So, first of all. Any last question? There will be plenty of time over the course of the day for questions. So, thank you so much. I introduced you before you came in. You okay with me back? Reverend Bruce Davidson.
We were doing a Lutheran conspiracy in the back. I'll use this, and hopefully you can hear okay. Is that on? I guess it is. Good morning, and first thing I want to say is thank you and compliments to you all for being out on a Saturday morning to talk about affordable housing. I was thinking as I was sitting in the pew, you shall not covet your neighbor's audience. If I were to try to gather Lutherans to talk about affordable housing on a Saturday morning, I would be talking to about 6 people. So the fact that you have this kind of a crowd on this day says a lot about your denomination and about your faith and about how you see that faith taking action. And congratulations to Seth and many of you that are not only doing effective programs right now to provide for the needs of people in the community, but just simply for the fact that you see this as an issue that people who put their faith in Jesus Christ and who follow that sense that in doing that we are called to love neighbors. This is a great thing to see. Secondly, I want to say that I've been a Lutheran pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America for, it'll be 35 years in May. I was ordained when I was 12, in case you're wondering. And one of the things that I look back on with the most sense of satisfaction and gratitude to God is that our church, at some point in time, worked very closely with our partners in the Reformed tradition. And our first significant ecumenical agreement of full communion was with the Reformed churches. And I had the opportunity to attend our church-wide assembly that year and to actually vote in favor of that. And it is a joy to know that that ecumenical relationship really bears fruit in New Jersey and throughout the United States. There are places where Lutheran congregations are being served by pastors from the Reformed tradition. There are Reformed congregations throughout the United States being served by Lutheran congregations, and I pray for them on a regular basis, Lutheran pastors. And also there are times when we can gather together as a community of believers and share in word and sacrament without worrying about whether or not God will think it's okay. And it is a joy, again, to be able to be a part of a community in which we do have that sense that we belong together through what Christ has done for us and how that is celebrated, again, both in word and sacrament. So it's great to be able to just say, again, how happy it is for us to be able to be partners. I was asked to talk about 2 things. First of all, about something called COA, and the other is a denominational approach to supportive housing. And I want to start by trying to say something about COA, which is the Council on Affordable Housing. This week I heard the Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs take about 45 minutes to explain to members of the state legislature what COA is and does. I'm not going to take 45 minutes. But it probably does take that much time to get into the detail. But what I want to try to do is just in a few minutes talk a little bit about what that is and try to clear up at least some misconceptions that may be out there about what this COA deal is really all about. It goes back to the mid-'80s. It goes back to 2 Supreme Court decisions of the Supreme Court of the State of New Jersey called the Mount Laurel case 1 and 2. It established, the Supreme Court at least, established in the state of New Jersey that communities needed to provide, every community, every municipality in New Jersey needed to provide opportunity for people of any income to live in their community. That you could not exclude, it would be unconstitutional to exclude low and moderate income people from living in any community in the state of New Jersey. That was simply a right that was guaranteed by our state constitution. So that was the decision. In order to implement that court decision, something called the Council on Affordable Housing was set up. The idea being that this council would be responsible for developing a plan that would help communities in New Jersey to figure out how they would respond to their constitutional requirement. And so the council would decide how much affordable housing was needed across the state and what share of affordable housing needed to be provided in any particular community. And they would propose that as a rule, and then communities could buy into that rule and say, yes, our community will accept this responsibility and we will indeed provide X number of units of affordable housing as part of our constitutional requirement. The plans are not mandatory, okay? They are by choice. A community says, we will do this. We will submit a plan. The plan can include age-restricted housing. It can include all kinds of other forms of housing as long as it provides enough units of affordable housing to provide for the need. Now, the way the rules are set up today, the provision of that housing comes only when a community allows any kind of development of market rate housing. So if X decides that it's going to allow development in its community, both industrial development that's going to create jobs or housing development that's market rate, then that town also needs to say, we will provide X number of affordable units to match the market rate units that are being provided. If they don't provide affordable units, then they're going to get in trouble with the state if they provide market rate units and or job opportunities in that community. Is everybody thoroughly confused at this point in time? It is a way, I think, of trying to put some fairness into the plan. COA rules do not say, okay, community X, you go out there, your obligation is 300 units of affordable housing. You go out there, raise tax money from your community and build units. It doesn't work that way. The money for the affordable housing that's provided comes out of the development of other housing projects at a market rate. So it does not have to cost taxpayers money. If a municipality wants to build housing that's affordable and provide it without providing market rate units at the same time, they're free to do that and to raise taxes to make that possible. And there isn't one single politician in the state of New Jersey that would ever suggest that. But you could do it. That's permissible. What happens if a community does not provide a COA plan? What happens is simply this, that they are then open to something called a builder's remedy. If you don't have a COA plan, that means that the developer can go to the state and say, we want to put up 500 units of housing in community X, and we will designate 20% of that housing to be affordable. So we get, 80% market rate units, and we will provide out of that development, 20% affordable units, and the town will not have recourse to stop that development. Okay? That's why COA plans are so important. It protects communities from development that they cannot control. It gives the town a way to put together a plan that will indeed, as the community grows, make sure that there is opportunity for folks who are low and middle income to have a place to live in that community, to live close to where there are opportunities for employment, perhaps. But also, to live in a place that might at least give people a chance to not live in a place where poverty is concentrated, but to live in places where they can enjoy the benefits and dignity that might be provided in the community outside of those areas right now in the state of New Jersey where poverty is most prevalent. That's what COA is basically about, okay? It's an attempt to try to provide some plan and framework around which affordable housing can be built. But please remember, this does not cost towns money unless they choose to do it that way. It is not mandatory, okay? And it is not the government telling you who your neighbors have to be. All right? Any questions about that? Or should I? Yes, Seth.
Just a comment about COA. In terms of getting a project through,
Yeah.
you know, like Bruce said, there's nobody who wants to raise tax money to build affordable housing. But if you go to your mayor and you say, I can get you 11 COA units funded through state, county, whatever, and some private money, it's here in your town, and that can become part of the plan.
Right.
There's nobody who dislikes that idea, or very few who do, that it can help you meet your obligation without adding for-profit housing.
Would that it were so. The problem still is, and that's right, and I think that's one of the things that I would suggest that faith communities can do, is that we can be the initiators of programs that provide affordable housing options in communities that are reasonable and just. And we can actually do that. But there is still resistance, and significant resistance across the state of New Jersey anytime you use the word affordable housing. And mostly because many people still think that affordable housing is a project that's going to attract crime, the wrong kinds of people, lots of children that we will then have to have an obligation for educating, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I think the faith community has a responsibility to do is to help educate people around the fact that affordable housing is simply housing that makes it possible for necessary low-wage workers to be able to live in the community where they work, including sometimes children that have grown up in that neighborhood who go away to college, try to come back and find out they can't live in the neighborhood where they grew up. But there is also a sense in which I think the faith community can raise the moral voice and simply say, we are proposing for you a way of doing this that's not going to cost a lot of money, and it is a moral and legal obligation, as we understand it, for us to move forward. And our congregation is behind this, along with the other congregations in the community. Take the action that's necessary. It's long overdue. So I think that's right. Yes, Pam.
I just want to one of the things I'm just really learning, and the more we do supportive housing and the more projects we have, I just firmly believe that a good project is a good project. A good housing project that has good design, that has good property management, that does good maintenance, that has good services, is a benefit to community, and it really doesn't make any difference who lives there. So I think the more that we can talk about housing as an asset and doing good projects and being really diligent about the way we do housing in communities, I think we're in a much better position.
I agree, and we also, I think, need to realize that we do face a challenge because of the stereotypes and because of the fear that exists. But if there's one thing that the faith community can do, is it can address unfair stereotypes, and it can address the fear people have of differences. And that's where our moral voice, as well as our practical voice, can come in. Someone in the back?
Jane Price.
Hi, Jane.
I just wanted to ask about tax revenue to the town. In an area where you're having 20 or whatever, the tax revenue is less for the municipality based on the fact that the affordable housing is not market rate assessed. Is that
Correct.
And how can you talk to towns about that? How can you make that sound attractive?
I'm not sure that there's a way to make it sound attractive. I think there's a way of saying that when you look at it in terms of the economic benefit to a community to have low-wage workers living there that provide essential services, that can be a wash. That it's kind of the same argument as to why churches are tax exempt. It's not because we like churches and they do a great thing and the Constitution is nudging and winking about First Amendment separation issues. It's because we're tax exempt because it's assumed that our presence in the community will return in service more than would be returned if we were taxed. So one of the things to say around that argument is that it is of benefit to our community to make sure that people who are, for instance, home health aides, can afford to live in our communities, to care for people in our communities who are going to need those services at some point in time. If they can't live there, we're not necessarily going to be able to get them. And if we do, the cost of getting them is going to be higher than it would be if they were living there. Somebody, Pam?
I was going to say, for supported housing, we encourage a lot of our projects actually to work with their municipalities and work out pilots, payments in lieu of taxes. I mean, recognizing that in fact we are using resources. We
Sure.
are using services in the community. And that, I mean, that certainly is an option.
Yeah. And again, the idea that, you know, that opportunity and ideas and people who are going to grow up in a community and bring benefit to a community can come from affordable housing as much as it can come from non-affordable housing. That, you know, it is often the people that are newcomers to a community who provide, you know, a sense of gratitude for living there, who are going to contribute in ways that you can hardly measure. I know.
I'm sorry. I'm going to pretend to be the mayor of Eatontown. I'm
Right.
buying it. No, I'd much rather have a lawyer or
Sure.
a doctor in my town
Right.
providing more taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the services that these people are going to provide are not of any direct public benefit. They're going to benefit the profit-making enterprises in my town, perhaps. So it's a third party.
And I don't want this to become a debate on COA, but if I were not the mayor of Eatontown, what I would say to you is it's nice that that's what you want. Unfortunately, the Constitution of the state of New Jersey and 2 Supreme Court decisions say you are obligated not simply to have a community full of lawyers and doctors. You must provide low-income housing and affordable housing. That is simply your civic and legal responsibility. So get cracking, or some developer is going to come in and make sure that you do have it anyway.
That's right.
By the way, the mayor of Eatontown is not one of those most likely to have taken.
That's correct. That's correct. That's exactly right. Mario?
No, but yeah, and I was going to say, can you also clarify a little bit more about how some of the townships or some cities have tried to bypass that responsibility?
Well, I'd rather, yeah, and that's no longer legal. I'd rather not get into the details of that, but what I can say is that the COA plans over the course of the last 25 years have really been full of ways that towns and townships can get around their obligation. And believe me, towns and townships have used all of those options in many cases. And now I think the Department of Community Affairs and I think the current governor has said enough. It's been 30 years. We haven't made the progress we need to do. And I think the COA rules that are in this round, at least, are an attempt to say to communities, look, we need to get serious. It's just simply right that housing opportunity be available throughout the state, period. And it's good for the state, and it's good for everybody and when you get right down to it. It is no longer healthy or helpful for the state of New Jersey to have affordable housing concentrated in communities of poverty, 13 of them, around the state of New Jersey. We have to do better than that. Okay, and very briefly, I was going to talk more about denominational approaches, and later on you'll hear from a really great panel of people who are going to talk about some specific projects. But let me just put it this way very simply from, I think, our shared tradition. In the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, in our service of baptism, we ask people to make some promises about what it means to follow the Lord Jesus Christ as a baptized child of God. And that includes 2 things. One is to serve all people, following the example of our Lord Jesus Christ. We all know how easy that is. And then secondly, to strive for justice and peace in all the world. And we say to baptismal sponsors and to people being baptized, if they're adults, do you promise to fulfill these obligations? And people say yes. That doesn't mean God won't honor God's side of the agreement if we fail in that. But we say that that's setting at least some standard of what we expect of Christians. In our liturgical tradition, periodically, congregations affirm that baptismal covenant. And again, people in the pews say, you know, I will serve all people, following the example of our Lord Jesus, and strive for justice and peace in all the world. There are two different things being said there. First of all, that as a community of faith, we have a responsibility to serve as Christ served. And that means that we give of ourselves for the sake of people in need, the way Christ gave freely for us. One of the things congregations, religious communities, and communities of faith need to do, of course, is share of what we have, of our resources, of our time, of our energy, to see that supportive housing, affordable housing, is built through congregations working together, through the agencies of our church bodies, so that indeed people who do not have adequate shelter or support in their living have a place to live. That's a part, I think, of the promise of serving all people. That's part of it. That's the charitable part. That's the giving part. We need to step up to the plate, I think, in these times to do an even better job of putting ourselves out there as people who are willing to use our resources, frankly, to see that this kind of housing is promoted and provided in communities. And you'll hear later from the panel some really excellent examples of how that happens. The other part is strive for justice and peace in all the world. A lot of what happens, I think, in the state of New Jersey and around the country around the provision of affordable housing is an issue of justice. And the issue of justice is, when you get right down to it, there are a whole lot of folks that really don't think that they want those people living in their community. And behind that is a sense of, I think, injustice. And so, in my denomination at least, we have a social service agency called Lutheran Social Ministries that is the agency through which we do most of the provision of affordable housing throughout the state of New Jersey that has the name Lutheran attached to it. Congregations participate in that, but the agency really is the group that kind of puts that forward. At the same time, our church has said we need to have someone, at least, who is coordinating efforts to promote advocacy among government and government officials to make sure that we all understand, as citizens of a state and a country, that taking care of people in need is not simply the responsibility of those few charitably minded people who might care about the issue, perhaps. It is the responsibility of the whole society. That's what our government and our state constitution, and I think our federal constitution, suggests. And so in our church, we've been able to set up a number of state advocacy ministries, the purpose of which is to stand up and speak on behalf of our church body and to call government to honor its responsibility to care for people in need. In New Jersey, this office has been in existence for 25 years, and it actually flowed out of our church's hunger appeal going back 35 years. The idea being, at first, we raised money to, feed people by giving, seeds and produce to people around the world. We then moved into the area of trying to help people with developmental projects that could help them feed themselves. And then we said we need to use some of the money that we raised through this offering to work with government to try to get government to do a better job of responding to the needs of people who are poor. And so we have advocacy ministries in our church to be a ministry through which I, as a director of one of those agencies or ministries, stands up with state leaders and says, look, this is something that is expected of a just society, and also to encourage all of the baptized, in our denomination at least, to understand that in our baptism we were all called to speak on behalf of those who need to live with the benefits of justice that are provided in this particular society. So we try to approach the issue from two fronts: direct service, and also then the ministry of advocacy that calls on us to be the best possible citizens, not just promoting self-interest, but promoting the interest of those whose voices very often are overlooked. So that's pretty much how we approach things. Does that help? And I'm way out of time?
No, you're good. I would just say, Bruce, before you leave, you started this conversation by referencing the formula of agreement and how good it is that we can break bread together and not worry what God thinks. But I want to end it by saying that
Did I really say that?
I want to end it by saying that the formula of agreement, we haven't taken it to joint efforts of advocacy.
Correct.
And you speaking about, that you have an Office of Governmental Ministries and you're in charge of that here, we ought to be tapping into that as part of the formula. So
absolutely, you're welcome. And checks can be made out to the New Jersey. That's how I read the formula of agreement. I don't know about no. Yes.
Just one comment in relationship to what COA does, okay? I simply feel, and I may be wrong, that most people think that affordable housing, as you say, means drug addicts, etc. Has there been really a task of COA to present what it really does? Most people don't know that taxpayers, it doesn't cost taxpayers.
Right.
Has there ever been a study done that would tell, for example, who are the people that use affordable housing, what is done? And then also, in relationship to churches that are growing, has COA made an effort to reach out to those, what do you call them, praise churches or whatever, to present the same thing? Because whether you're Lutheran or Reformed or whatever you are, part of the process should be making people informed so that everyone buys into this.
Yes.
Because without that, it's never going to succeed.
Amen to that. And I think my own observation is that COA has not done enough to help people understand what they mean by affordable housing and what it looks like in various communities, because there are wonderful stories that if people knew about them would say, oh, well, we're not against that. And that's really something that we have, I think that the state has not done a very good job of. Although there have been a number of nonprofit organizations and coalitions that have tried to tell that story in various communities with some degree of success, and I think that's been great. As far as outreach to the faith community, there has been considerable outreach, mainly through the Department of State, through the Office of Faith-Based Initiatives, to try to get congregations, communities of faith to respond to the need for affordable housing. The task has not been embraced in a large level. What I will say is that one of the successes over the last few years was that the Council on Affordable Housing agreed that Habitat for Humanity houses could count towards a community's COA obligation. And that was a bit of a fight, but it was finally included, and that's good because a lot of faith communities are behind Habitat programs, and a lot of communities will say, oh, we don't mind building a Habitat house because we know the people who move in there are going to be responsible and care for their homes. But that's the kind of thing we really need to do much better. Thank you for that comment. That's absolutely right. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bridget? And Bridget, it's one T and no E, right? Did I spell it?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I spelled it. I got it right on one paper along the way. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Oops, if I don't knock over the table, I'll be fine. Can I just ask a question? How many people here are from Middlesex County? Okay. And I know we have some people from Monmouth County, Burlington, Ocean. Okay. Somerset. Union. Okay. All right. Well, I'm here to tell you a little bit about what's happening in Middlesex County, but hopefully give you some ideas that of where to go to in your own counties. New Jersey is the home rule state, so as you know, our over 560 so many municipalities all think that they are terribly independent. Luckily, we only have 21 counties, and but in essence, we are a very diverse state, not only in our population, I think, not only in our faith communities, but also in the nature of what happens in those communities. We have some very rural ones. We have some that are practically totally urban. Then there's Middlesex, and I always say that's why they call us Middlesex, because we have 2 older urban centers that don't come anywhere near being 1/10 of our population. A lot of older suburban neighborhoods where most of our population are, and we still have farming down in South County. And having grown up in New Brunswick, and I have to tell you one story because we are in a Reformed church, that my father pretty much convinced everybody in the city of New Brunswick that he was the convert from Dutch Reform. However, it was my great-grandfather when he married Bridget Reardon, who was from the County Cork, and said, "You want to marry me? You're going to become a RC," which doesn't mean Reformed Church, means Roman Catholic. However, I do consider myself hopefully a woman of faith. I always usually describe myself as a Christian who chooses to worship in the Roman Catholic denomination. But one other thing that Bruce was talking about, oh yeah, I know the Lutherans too. Let me see, they tried to make me a Mormon once, that didn't work out too well. Lots of my friends are Muslim and Jewish and Hindu, or Hindi. And, other than that, I just do want to say one thing about what Bruce was saying about people living near where they work. And the people who are here from Middlesex County will understand what I'm about to say. In the southern part of our county, what we've been growing lately are 2 things. One is McMansions, and the other things are big warehouses. Well, guess what? The people who live in the McMansions don't work in the warehouses. And what we're finding out in terms of economic development in the county of Middlesex is that some of those companies that they thought wanted to be in the southern part of the state because it was good to transportation centers and what else, and there again they call us Middlesex because we're kind of like in the middle of the state. But they couldn't get the people to the jobs because those were lower income people. And so finally, in our county Department of Economic Development, they're willing to say, yeah, we need affordable housing, particularly in those areas, because it'll make it a whole lot easier to get those people to those jobs and become, excuse me, a viable part of our economic stability in the county. Anyway, there's two areas that I wanted to talk about, and one is counties and affordable housing, and the other thing is our 10-year plan to end homelessness. One thing about affordable housing, counties pretty much have absolutely no power when it comes to planning, zoning, or permits for any kind of housing and or rateables. However, what we do have is financial leverage. In our county, there are millions of dollars that could be available to help leverage other funding. Now that doesn't mean that there's money to do an entire project, but there are dollars that you can use for affordable housing. One of them is community development block grants. In Middlesex County, we actually have 6 separate local CDBG communities, those being our 6 largest municipalities, and we are also designated an urban county, which means that we have 25, if you're good at math. The 19 smaller communities, of which Highland Park would be one, are part of the urban county. So the county also gets community development block grants. They also get other HUD dollars, not only HUD, but also DCA dollars in the form of home dollars, CHODO, emergency shelter grants, a whole bunch of stuff that you can use to help develop some housing. Now, I'm in the Department of Human Services, and my division is the Division of Social Work Services, not to be confused with the Board of Social Services, which is where they do direct services. In some counties, I know they have combined both their boards of social services and their departments of human services. Not so in our county, as of yet. However, I usually get the calls for everybody who needs the food stamps, the Work First, the TANF, the GA, and I just have to tell them there's another number and they have a call center and you'll be put in a line, and it'll probably be only 20 or 30 minutes before you'll find out where to go. But anyway, but under my Division of Social Work Services, we allocate the social services for the homeless dollars. They are state dollars, and they go to 5 core service areas: prevention, emergency shelter, emergency food, case management, and our homeless hotline. And in fact, every county in the state of New Jersey is supposed to, and I think they do, have a 24/7 call line, which is known as their homeless hotline, for those who find themselves to be homeless. We also have county support grants. Here again, that's county dollars. Not a whole lot, but our first priority for those county dollars is what we call Housing First, which is a little bit more than just that model, but it has to do with making sure that people are sheltered and have a place to stay. We also are where our continuum of care is placed. That isn't the same in all counties, but in our county, we sort of manage our continuum of care. In order to apply for HUD homeless dollars, you must have a continuum of care, and you actually are supposed to have a 10-year plan to end homelessness, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Excuse me, can you just define continuum of care?
Well, continuum of care is having a plan. That's why it has to do with that, but it's specifically about how you're going to address homeless issues. I mean, Allison did a great job of doing the overview of homelessness in the state. We just did have the count the other day, as she said. Please don't ask me how many. I think we probably surveyed about 1,000 people in Middlesex County. That does not mean that was 1,000 surveys. That doesn't mean that a lot of them weren't families and what have you, so that would mean more individuals. And I have to tell you, I didn't come with all the numbers, okay? But we got a whole bunch. So the continuum of care, you're supposed to have providers, you're supposed to hopefully have some people from the corporate or business world involved, and to try and do a really comprehensive plan to have all elements of your community involved with addressing the needs of the homeless. And I have to tell you, in Middlesex County too, we have a lot of hidden homeless. As I said before, we don't have like a major urban center, so you don't see a lot of people on the street, though that is the stereotype that people believe in. And so it's hard to convince people in Middlesex County that we have a whole bunch of homeless people, but they're walking around and they look a lot like you and me. And a lot of them have a job. Others have a disability of one sort or another. And and a lot of them are living in tents or lean-tos. We just had a tragedy at the beginning of this year and this month. I can't believe it's only the end of January, because if January is any indication of how busy 2009 is going to be, I don't know if I'm going to survive it. But on January 5th in the city of Perth Amboy, a homeless gentleman known as Jan the Slovak was killed in a fire because he had a make-to shack that he built behind a meat market. The people in the meat market had no problem with him. In fact, they fed him. And one night he started a fire to keep warm, and he burned to death. And so, you know, poor Jan the Slovak guy, nice guy, you know, we hear that a lot. Oh, you know, finally have gotten some police departments to understand that they do have homeless. We have homeless in every community in Middlesex County, including the township of Cranberry. And actually, because Cranberry still is so rural, we have a lot of people down there. But, well, anyway, just to tell you a little story about them, they called us up. We had sent a letter out to all our police departments to be involved in our point-in-time survey this year, and their usual thing, we have no homeless here. We have vagrants, we have loiterers, and I said if they had a railroad, they'd probably have hobos, but we don't have any homeless. Then they called back and they said, well, we do have this one guy who lives in a tent. We've arrested him a lot. And if we go to survey him, we're going to have to arrest him again. But we have all his information. Do you think we could fill out the survey for him? Go right ahead. And then they called back again and said, oh, we got a mother and a son, and they kind of hang around the path mark. They're homeless too. They don't seem to have any place to go. But they tell us that Home Depot has offered both of them jobs, but they don't want to go work there because they're afraid that they're going to lose their government check. Okay, we're going to go out and try and corral them and make them do the survey. You know, it's very difficult, but boy, if we had more of our police departments, I think our numbers would go up even higher, because they really do know that we have some homeless people, but I digress. Also, we have in our, every county has a Human Services Advisory Council. In the state regulations regarding those Human Services Advisory Councils, there is now a mandate to have a housing continuum of care. Our continuum of care is in what we used to call, and what every county used to have, which was a CEASE committee, a Comprehensive Emergency Assistance Systems Committee. That was back in the day when all we did was try and, you know, react to emergency situations. Now we call our old CEASE committee, which half the people still call the CEASE committee, the Middlesex County Housing Continuum of Care Committee. We're trying to get them, our new acronym is going to be MCIC, because we like to have mix a lot. But they are part, as I said, part of that state mandate. But know that every county's Human Services Advisory Council does have to have this housing continuum of care, which goes from homelessness to affordable housing. In my division, we also deal with persons with disabilities and veterans, both of which you will find are in the ranks of our homeless. And hopefully soon we will have input into the allocation of the county homeless trust funds. Legislation we hope will be passed at the end of the month of February, giving each county the ability to put together a county homeless trust fund. Those dollars in that legislation there are all these things about what it can be used for, but it can be used for prevention, it can be used for vouchers, it can be used for the development of a lot of responses to homelessness. Now, we were about to publicly launch our Middlesex County 10-year plan to end homelessness last Wednesday, but we postponed it because of the weather, which in New Jersey, you can guarantee whatever date in January we pick to do the point in time, the homeless point in time, and Project Homeless Connect will be either the coldest day of the year or have the absolute worst weather. I mean, it's guaranteed. New York City did theirs Monday. Oh, it wasn't so bad. We did ours Wednesday, and throughout the state, we either had snow, sleet, freezing rain, or torrential downpours. I saw some people Wednesday evening who were homeless, and they were drenched, and they were going to have to live out on the street when the temperatures were going to have to plummet that night. And in fact, just to tell another anecdotal story, that night in the city, they had two plainclothes police officers who were a little arrogant when they started taking people around for the street outreach. And in fact, one of them took a cigarette out of a homeless person's mouth and started to smoke it. One of the other people who was there was like, I don't know if I would have actually done that. And I'm thinking, it was the guy's last cigarette. And that's what he said to him. That's my last cigarette. By the end of the night, they had found 3 homeless guys in a place where they didn't even know the homeless were involved. One of them was already in the early stages of hypothermia. They got him to the hospital. They got the other 2 guys to the Salvation Army in Perth Amboy, their seasonal shelter. And we're kind of like going, wow, we could have saved a life tonight. So we think they're going to be less arrogant and more helpful next year, unless they have short memories. But, oh, yeah, okay. Anyway, the areas of focus in our 10-year plan are permanent housing, a single point of entry, prevention, increase of economic opportunities, and Coming Home of Middlesex County, Inc. That is a new private nonprofit that we have established whose sole purpose is to implement our plan. Permanent housing, Middlesex County is pretty much built out, and so we do have an opportunity, the last vestige of Camp Kilmer. We're going to do 120 units of affordable housing that was put together by our Camp Kilmer Collaborative, which was a number of housing providers and homeless providers. 30 units will be for the chronically homeless. All of the units on the bottom floor of this 3-story building will be completely accessible, meaning they will have roll-in showers. The rest of the building will be accessible to those who have mobility issues. But we're really looking to do some voucher programs, keep people from ever entering into the homeless system, and obviously working towards their sustainability. Can I just?
One more, just
Okay.
one minute. I've got 4 other people.
No, I know, I understand. But find out in your county who holds the community development block grant dollars. Do you have a 10-year plan? Where do you get your HUD homeless dollars and your SSH? Who your county human services advisory council was. I tried to get a listing of that, but unfortunately wasn't able to do that. And whether your county is going to get a homeless trust fund. And good luck to all of you, because I know you're going to do some great stuff.
Great. Thank you, Richard. I want to say that Middlesex County was the key to us connecting with HMFA, really, in that you can't do, you can't get all your funding from one source for these projects. Pam talked about the importance of partnerships, and it was Bridget's office and the other offices connected to Bridget that provided about 30% of the construction budget. So do connect with your counties, and that list she just read off at the end is a really important list. So maybe right after, if you can have that list available, they can, right, if they missed any of them, they can get it down, the last 5 things you said. So thanks so much. I want to invite Bob Thier to come up. I'm excited to introduce Bob because he works for University Behavioral Health Care, which is going to be the service provider for our agency's newest housing project, which is 11 units for veterans back from Iraq and Afghanistan and other homeless veterans. But we just found out yesterday for sure that we've got the funding on all that. So anyway.
Thanks, Seth.
On the service part.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Good.
Okay, so I wanted to just thank Seth and everybody here for having us all here and this opportunity to talk to you guys about something that's really dear to all of our hearts, supportive housing and services out in the community. So as Seth said, we're very excited to have this collaboration with the Reformed Church of Highland Park. The project's going to be working with veterans coming back from the war. And it looks like the collaboration is going to work where our agency will provide the services and Seth is working on developing the housing. And so I think moving forward for a service provider such as our agency, this is a very exciting time to be able to specialize in a specific area such as service provision and then have other people out there in the communities developing the housing. With that, I'm sure that there's a lot of questions that folks may have. I don't know how much experience people have working with people with mental illness, working with individuals that have had homeless histories. So what I'm going to try to do is talk a little bit about our philosophy at UBHC Supportive Housing Program, highlight a little bit of what our team looks like, different disciplines and different services we can provide. Hopefully I'll get through this as quickly as I can and have some questions because I assume that that might be the best way that this would work is, if there's any concerns, fears, questions about specifically how we work with somebody, I want to open it up to you guys to ask me.
1 second. I would just ask, if you pull out, I gave you a picture that shows there's a house at the bottom and 3 different agencies. I just suggest this now as Bob's pulling that out. When you do a supportive housing, there's 3 partners, at least as I see it, the Church of Supportive Housing. There's a church, there's the housing developer, that's the church housing agency, in our case RCHP AHC, and then you'll see MIF for Arena Court on that chart. MIF is a support service provider. As Bob's speaking, picture him being that entity. So I'm just trying to give you the placement of where in this matrix Bob's agency would fit. It's UBHC, not MIF, because for veterans we have a different support service provider, but you'll have your own person like this.
I just want to build on that for a second too. As you guys are thinking about developing housing and thinking about a population of individuals that you want to help or serve, it's important, as Pam highlighted and also Allison, to get together and collaborate and really plan out what your project's going to look like. The service provider piece is also somebody that, if you had somebody in mind, such as us, to bring us into the table or bring us to the table in the conversation and ask what services can we actually provide and what would that look like for your population. Because for the population of folks we're working with in Seth's project, the veterans, it might look very different from another group of another population of individuals, maybe the homeless, maybe families, different groups like that. So I'm going to start by reading you 2 quick definitions which really cover the tenets and the core of our philosophy at UBHC Supportive Housing. And those 2 definitions are for recovery and also wellness. So just bear with me for a second as I read these. Recovery is defined as a deeply personal, unique process of changing one's attitudes, values, feelings, and goals, skills, or roles. It is a way of living satisfying, hopeful, and contributing life, even with the limitation caused by mental illness. Recovery involves the development of new meaning and purpose in one's life as one grows beyond the catastrophic effects of mental illness. These definitions are from a wellness and recovery action plan, again, that makes up our philosophy and really comes from the Division of Mental Health Services. Wellness is defined as an active process of becoming aware of and making choices towards a more successful existence. Wellness is the process in which a person in recovery is empowered to make purposeful choices that lead to a more satisfying and healthy lifestyle. It includes physical, emotional, intellectual, social, environmental, leisure, and I think you guys will like this one, spiritual dimensions, and incorporates disease prevention and health promotion approaches. A wellness lifestyle leads to positive outcomes that can be measured in terms of improved health status, greater productivity, enhanced social relationships, and participation in purposeful activity, all of which provide meaning opportunities for healing, personal growth, and improved quality of life. This is basically what we try to do. These are our core philosophies as we go out in the community and work with people that are homeless and suffering from mental illness. So I'm going to highlight really what our program looks like, and I'm going to go through a couple different disciplines and different roles on our team. It's not to say every supportive housing program would have all these roles. We worked over the years to really develop a complete sort of package of services that we can provide to somebody. So let me start with the core of our team is really made up of a team of case managers. Case managers really go out into the community, meet people in their homes, meet people where they're at, and really work to link them to services. A lot of times when we see people coming off the streets in a homeless situation, as was said before, someone doesn't have a mailbox, someone doesn't have benefits, doesn't really have access to services, even if services are available for them out there. And more often than not, we see individuals that are homeless accessing services through maybe the ER, which is really might not be the best health services for them versus going to a primary care physician or a specialist, and it's also very draining on hospital budgets as well. So the key really is to link people to services and see what's out there. Income also is a major one. A lot of times we see somebody that's on the streets that's only receiving $210 a month for general assistance when they're actually disabled and are entitled to more benefits through SSI, better medical insurance, and so on and so forth. Also, we try to link people that come into these different housing environments with other types of benefits in terms of energy assistance and reduced rates on their telephone. Because everybody is really living in on a very fixed income, so it's really tough to get by on $600 or $700 a month. But there's a number of resources, and our case managers are very resourceful to access these resources for people so they can have a quality life. In addition to case management services, which is really going out, 7 days a week, really as needed. We might see some people once a week. We might see some people once a month. We might see some people every day. It really depends. They're flexible services for the individuals. In addition, on our team, and looking back to the wellness statement that I just read, people with serious mental illness tend to die 20 to 25 years younger than the normal population. So take a second and think about that. If we're striving to make it to 75, 80 years old, I don't know what the actual average is for a person today, 25 years younger. We see people dying in our programs at 50, at 55 years old, and at 60. Really missing out on a huge piece of their lives due to the mental illness. So we focus on the health aspect as well. We have people on our team. We have an advanced practice nurse, and we also have a licensed practical nurse. Both of these guys go out into the community, meet people in their homes, and provide the services and try to link them to different types of health care. So what does that look like? We have a lot of people that are managing diabetes, high blood pressure. We have a lot of people that are overweight as a result of their medications. It's a very serious side effect from some of these psychiatric medications that people are on. So we do initiatives around that to try to help people manage the different diseases that they have. And also to access health care, to not go to that ER when their blood sugar level is up to 500 one day and they need to get rushed there, but to say, okay, let's teach you what healthy living is about. Let's teach you how to eat properly, how to shop for food that'll manage your diabetes, how to cook those foods. A lot of times, you might be diagnosed with a serious medical issue. We've had a number of people that have had diagnosis of COPD and unfortunately in some situations cancer in our program. These people go to the docs, they don't really understand exactly what the docs are saying, you get rushed in and out. So our nurses will go with them to try to learn, what the doc is actually saying and what the course of treatment is, and then to go back in the community and support them so they can follow through with that treatment. Our team also has therapists on the team. We call them clinicians. They're master level counselors, people often with a social work degree. And what these folks do is they, again, go out into the community and try to meet people where they're at to provide therapy in the home. Traditionally, mental health treatment facilities, such as outpatient therapy, where you might go to see a psychiatrist or a therapist each week, may work great for people in this room, may work great for myself, but that's based on the idea that I'm actually going to go in for treatment and I'm invested in my treatment. A lot of times with the population of folks that we see, they're not willing to go in for those services. Somebody with severe mental illness may not feel comfortable in a waiting room. Somebody that's suffering from schizophrenia may have paranoid thoughts and doesn't really want to go out into the community. They tend to isolate a lot more. Our goal is to get them out into the community, but in the meantime, we want to be able to provide them the services that they need if there is a barrier for getting them into an outpatient facility. So that's really where our therapists come on board. And we go out into the homes, they'll run therapy sessions in clients' homes and really try to connect with them. There's assessments as well. We always want to take a look at where people are at, making sure they're healthy, making sure that they're stable. So the clinicians also provide that level of care. If somebody isn't doing too well, some psychiatric symptoms come back, there might be a period of time where they need a short hospitalization. So we try to make those assessments in the community and get an individual to the hospital as quickly as possible if they're in crisis, and as safely as possible to make sure that they get the help that they need. One of the other areas that I spoke about briefly in the wellness statement is employment. And work is therapeutic. We have a number of people in our program that we really have helped get back on their feet. And these are people that are, again, suffering from mental illness, may have been on the streets for a long period of time, but have the desire to work and have the ability to work. And we find that by supporting them in doing this, it really can help change their lives and really empower them. So in speaking to that, what we really do is we focus on job readiness. We talk to somebody about what their experiences have been in the workforce, if they have any, and if they want to get back in there, how to really prepare them to go out and look for a job. We've helped people get back to work in many different capacities. We've had people that have worked in retail. We've had people that have worked in supermarkets and stock rooms. We've had people that have gone back and worked in construction, reception, mail, for the post office. And really, when you see somebody get back on their feet and you can provide them support in those areas, it's an amazing transformation. You really get to see somebody grow and be proud not only of the home that they have through supportive housing, but what else they can achieve. One of the other areas and type of folks that you see on our team and you may see in other supportive housing teams are peer counselors. There's been a strong movement more recently, but it's actually been around for a while, but it's getting more attention now, for peer counselors. And what a peer counselor is somebody that's gone through that recovery process. You might have somebody that has a serious mental illness, that has been in treatment facilities, that has been in a state hospital, that's moving forward and now wants to help and counsel other folks. And we're fortunate enough to have two of these individuals on our team that have an amazing, recovery story. And it's very empowering for some of the people that are in supportive housing to connect with these guys, to really see that change is possible, that, hey, I've been there, out on the streets, and now I have a roof over my head, and now I have a job. Hey, I was in the mental health center, and, I received treatment 5 days a week for, a year and a half, and then I was able to move on from there and move on in my own wellness and recovery process. Hey, I've been in the state hospitals for sometimes a long period of time, 4 months, 6 months, but I was able to get well, get stable on my medications, enter the community again, and now really go to work and help other individuals. This model works great with people with mental illness. It works great in the addiction realm, and it's really some of the core philosophies behind AA and NA. If you get to see somebody that's gone through it and walked the walk, and they can stand by your side and sort of help you and support you through it, it can be a very empowering thing. And where some of us come in as mental health professionals, with a couple degrees, and you sit up here and you're like, oh, well, I know how to help you. A lot of times, some of the consumers in the program just don't really buy it. I want somebody that's like me. And this also is true with a lot of the vets. When we talk about Seth's program, we're looking to, try to connect somebody on our team, and we have some new positions that are going to open where we want to hire somebody that themselves is a vet and can connect with other veterans and support them in a way that maybe myself as not being a veteran wouldn't be able to do and make that connection. So peer counselors, as you see them in these various supportive housing programs, are extremely important as well. The last one that I'm going to, I got a couple more minutes left. The last one that I'm going to end with is community support. And I think that's pretty much one of the, they're all very important, but really one of the most important is friends and family and people out there in the community supporting a person. We come in as professionals and mental health providers and nurses and doctors and all that other great stuff. And someone highlighted it before, but we're paid professionals and we're going out there to do a job. And that's great. I mean, this is definitely needed. But there's more. People need more than just that. People need people in their community. People need their neighbors. And when I think about the collaboration with Seth and thinking today and seeing all you guys here, it's really exciting to think about the faith-based community and churches and how that really is going to tie into the whole thing. We've been doing this for a while, and we've really been doing it without the help of the church and without the help of faith-based communities. In certain cases, they work with specific people in our program, but never where there's facilities or apartments on the grounds of the church, and the congregation is really planning to reach out and assist the different people living in the apartments in the supportive housing programs. And somebody said it today, I think Seth started speaking about it, somebody else talked about it. Your congregations are made up of so many different people. So when I say my team is made up of some nurses and some clinicians and some docs, your congregation has doctors, has lawyers, have veterans, have people with many different life experiences, teachers, so the way that you guys and the congregations can work with the people that are living on your grounds are in many different ways than just our service providers can work with them. And that support's going to be crucial for the recovery process of people with mental illness, people with addiction, and homeless individuals. I think it can be a very empowering thing and can make a person feel like part of a community. And I think what we all do better when we feel like we're part of a community and we have supports. So that's a real quick overview of supportive housing and the services that we can provide. If I think I have a couple minutes
for questions.
Yeah, a couple minutes for questions. Do you guys have any questions about anything?
George Montanari from Middlebush. How do you work through some of the issues of confidentiality in the partnerships that you have to work with in providing services? When your nurses go to places where clients are receiving medical care, for example, do you have your clients sign waivers? Do you have some agreements, standing agreements with other medical service or therapeutic service providers? How does that work?
Well, we, at our agency, anytime we need to release information to any other agency about our consumers in our program, we have to have a signed release or consent. A lot of times, when we're out in the community doing work, we'll have the person with us, and a doc's appointment is a perfect example. Our LPN goes out, we're going to see your specialist about your diabetes, we're there together in the room, we might not need a signed consent for that person. We do try to get as many signed consents as possible because the better the collaboration between different service providers to each of these consumers, the better care that they're going to receive. Does anybody else have any other questions? about services? Or?
Just a comment. First of all, how many residents or clients do you serve currently?
Let's see.
Through UBHC?
Currently, our census is about 95. We've recently gone through a large growth period with some grants that we've written over the past year. So our capacity at this point is 130.
130, yeah. And I just wonder, you know, some of the folks who you're serving already live near the folks who are part of these churches. So just as something, you know, whether a church were to build housing on its property or not, there may be some intentionality that can be put into, you know, the collaboration for folks who are already receiving services. So just, you know, bring it back to your agency and spread it to other agencies, that maybe churches are the peer counselor, you know, add-on that would help people, because that would be a nice thing for them to know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when we meet new consumers that come into our programs, that's often something that we ask them. You know, someone coming out of the hospital, someone moving to a new community. You know, what's your faith? You know, and you know, are you connected to a Reformed church? Are you connected to a Catholic church, a synagogue, a mosque? Because they're places for support and they're places to be part of a community. And we've had on specific cases, you know, the church really stepping in and really helping a lot of people through their recovery process, and the individuals identifying it as crucial, you know, to them surviving out in the community. You know, so it is a collaboration that happens even when we don't have you know, an apartment on the church ground. And up until this point, this collaboration with our with Seth's church and our group. We do sort of scattered site apartments, so we have rental subsidies for these folks. So they live all across Middlesex County. A bunch of them live in Highland Park. I mean, really every county every town in Middlesex County. So some of them may go to, you know, your churches. You have a question?
Yeah, I just was going to ask, when you have this community segment, to whom are those volunteers responsible, and who supervises them, and who trains them? Is it the church, or is it a group such as yours?
Can you say that again? I don't completely understand.
How are the volunteers trained and supervised? To whom are they responsible?
You mean volunteers from the church?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if, I guess if they're working directly with an agency, but if a church is involved, what are the lines of authority?
Okay. Well, so I'll keep deferring back to our collaboration with Seth. It's an easy way to highlight it. So Seth's going to have the housing provide the housing for these individuals on the grounds of a church, or in a church, right?
Yeah.
And we're direct service providers to the people that are in the housing. The way that the church members would come into all this is really, it's really decided by the church. You know, in what capacity can you actually help these folks on the ground? What do they need? I would assume that you'd want them to come and be part of the congregation. I'm assuming maybe they would want that if they wanted to, yeah, you know, or if they didn't. We would really be available, I guess, in a consulting sort of format.
If you look at that picture again, that you'll see a little dotted line, like a rainbow over the top, that goes from the direct service provider back to the church. And that's what we've found so far, is that there needs to be ongoing communication with the direct service provider, but there's no official role that the church plays in providing these services. It's the unpaid friends, but informed unpaid friends, because of the relationship that's formed. So if you look at that picture, there's a rainbow of I'm seeing heads nod, so you see it in the picture there, that there is a relationship formed, but it's not official.
So is that relationship working through you, Seth, or through a committee in the church, or
So-
somebody you appointed, or what?
Yeah, in that case, yeah, that's a very good question. Because our development corporation that's building housing is also all made up of church members, what we currently do with our support service group for Arena Court is the director comes to our board meeting every month and gives us an update and says, you know, one thing I'm concerned about is there's 4 women who have birthdays in December and January, because, you know, you opened then, and that's, you know, they all turned 18 at the same time. And we want to make sure everybody has their own birthday, you know, and so we go, okay, that's something we can do. We can get involved in providing birthdays. So little things like that helped us be more informed neighbors and friends. So.
But to highlight, because I would imagine this would be one of the concerns, is that the service provision piece is the supportive housing agency's responsibility. So it's not that we're looking to you to provide therapy and all these other supports. It's really an add-on. It's an addition, you know, to all the things that we do.
And so the funding for all that is something you don't have to concern yourself with, which is a huge relief. So, I'm going to move on because of time. Robert, Bob, thank you. Father Jack, you're up next, right? Where is it? Hey, who's first? Oh, no, it's not. I looked at it first. So let's invite both Father Jeff and Peg. Did I pronounce it right? Bucci, I'm sorry. You weren't in when I messed up the name the first time. You're up, Bruce. Father Jeff, come on up. We'll be both together. Just wanted to get some word on the street on how this actually works. Different faith communities that have projects that are going other than Reformed Church of Highland Park's projects. So I'm not going to be part of this panel. We'll hear from these two.
How are you? Good morning. Thank you for inviting us today. I work for Lutheran Social Ministries of New Jersey, and Father Jeff and I kind of are neighbors in Camden, which is right next door to you.
Great.
And I think what we're here to talk about, at least what I anticipated I would be here to talk about today, was the development of how does development work between churches and other entities. And I'll get to some of the, I guess if you will, the nuts and bolts about as we sit as a developer, as a faith-based organization, and as a church, perhaps, as leaders of churches, what are your expectations and what should be your expectations as you really go out and look for a developer to say, okay, here's what we can do for you. I think hopefully one of the questions that today has raised for some of you has been, okay, well, now we've heard, you know, all of the different options of what we can do. How do we really come together as a congregation and hear what our congregants would like to do, and then how does that start to kind of get the ball rolling? And I can speak from that from first-hand knowledge of being that church entity as well, reaching out, as well as then being the developer. I think one of the most important first steps is really communication with your congregants about an idea that you may, as a pastor has, or as a leader of your church, to sit with your congregation and get a real finger on the pulse of exactly what is it that the vision of the church and the mission of the church wants to see happen. And the reason I say that is because at the end of the day, it's really your congregation that will be your biggest supporters as you put these programs together. Many times you may have an idea as a pastor, as church leaders, and you'll present it to the congregation, and the congregation majority may be supportive, and then you may have some really loud naysayers. At the end of the day, those naysayers may end up in fact being your largest and biggest supporters. So it's really important early on to communicate ideas and listen to the concerns of those naysayers, because at the end of the day, it goes back to communication. I think Bruce or someone earlier had spoken about the education piece. And it is about the first step of being here today, listening to the general information that you can collect to formulate your ideas of what you can take back to your congregation. From the developer side, when we have churches present ideas to us, or they come to us as an organization and say, okay, we would like to create something, we have a few ideas, can you add some insight? I think one of the questions that you'll want to ask yourself as church leaders is this initiative really something that we want to serve the greater population, or is it self-serving? And I say that, and I'll use this as a specific example. Many times we'll have churches come to us who may want to develop housing, whether it be senior, whether it be family, whether it be special needs. But at the end of the day, as we make it through maybe a half dozen meetings of getting to the next step, what we hear is, well, if my church and the congregants aren't going to have first access to this program, then I'm not quite sure if we really want to do it. So again, I think, as leaders of the church, you really step back and step up to your congregants and say, okay, in the spirit of being Christian, as we step out into this endeavor, what really is our agenda? And are we really willing to serve those that need the services, but not just our own personal desires? Some of the challenges I think that you may face, and I mean, this is, I guess, on an everyday basis. I think you heard the good about what happens in many of these programs that eventually serve those in need. But there will be some obstacles that you'll have to really recognize that you're going to face. Some of them being bureaucracy of local municipalities. Again, being able to reach out, find out who in fact in your congregation, hopefully, or within your municipalities have political support. That I can't say how important it is that you have legislators, local council people that understand your vision. So earlier, I believe, when the question was asked, at what point in time does a project or does a church take their idea to HMFA? You should take it probably very early on, because if you have an idea, you have a developer who understands what your mission is, and again, it's important that the developers support your mission and who you are as a church and what you would like to succeed at. It's also as important that you get that information to funders and again, your local council or municipality representatives, so they can give feedback as to how is the greater community going to receive this idea. Again, it's not, you have two steps of communication, one being within your church and your congregants, the other then is within the greater community as to where you're going to build these services. At the end of the day, if you're up against planning and zoning boards and having to stand before a zoning board where you now have greater community individuals being able to oppose your development, you want to have community meetings prior to that zoning meeting where you can really get out there, talk to individuals in the community. Many times the reason you were faced with the NIMBY is because it's just a matter of fear factor. It's a lack of education, it's a lack of understanding, and I think people are basically compassionate. If we can help them tap into that compassion, helps give a greater understanding as why we need to have whatever services provided in our community. And I want to continue here, so I'm going to let Father Jeff kind of...
Can everyone hear me this way, or do I need a microphone? All right, good. I'm used to preaching. So, I'm going to start a little differently because, I'm just going to start differently. So I want to start with two stories. The first is I'm a Catholic priest. I'm a Jesuit, if that means anything. And I was ordained, and I've served in Camden since I've been ordained. I went to Camden because I had an experience when I was in studies where I got a chance to go and live in Camden and be with the people. And I had a very profound faith experience while I was there. I mean, one, just living there and the experience of Camden. So Camden's really poor, right? 55% of youth live below the poverty line. 70% drop out of high school. In our neighborhood, $5,600 per capita income. So it's very poor. So I was there, and on Good Friday, the people of my church would go through the streets, and they would reenact the Passion. And I remember we got to one corner in North Camden, 7th and York, and it's like a notorious drug corner. So it's where there's lots of notorious drug corners, but this one was exceptionally notorious because it wasn't only sell drugs, but it was all kind of burnt out and vacant and all this kind of stuff. And what I remember is coming down the street, and we're with all these people, and they're carrying a big cross. And what I remember is the sound of the glass under my feet. And I remember them planting the cross and having a station. I don't even remember what station it was. But at that moment, I just realized what an incredible statement of faith that was. That in the midst of all this destruction and seemingly all this suffering that doesn't have any answer and that's ongoing in people's lives, people claimed God. They were witnesses to that there is a higher power greater than any of this. And I wanted to be a part of that. And that's why I went back there. And that's a really kind of a neat story for me, you know, and that it doesn't mean that it's any easier. You know, it doesn't make the problems that we face go away, but it does give me the energy and the courage to continue and to find God and to collaborate with God in that, you know. And so I say that because what happened out of that was when I went there as a priest, I was asked to work with young people. And I had no idea what to do. I was the associate pastor in our parish. So I had this idea of how to develop an organization using technology. And what happened was I went away to a workshop. This is I'm getting to housing, I promise. I went to New Orleans and roomed with a Lutheran pastor from one of the churches there in Camden. And I told this guy, hey, I have this idea, we could do this. And he's like, that's great. You need to meet Pastor Margaret, the other Lutheran pastor. So we met and we said, let's do this idea. And so we've collaborated and created a nonprofit there that does website design and development, GIS video. It employs youth. It helps youth go to school. We're helping youth get into college, helping them get back into school. So our whole project has been a collaborative project from the beginning. And so we've sort of backed into housing. We backed into housing. Unlike this, we didn't come to a meeting and say, oh, let's do housing. What's happened is that we have a need. And what's happened is that we've actually been successful at helping a lot of our youth. In a very poor city, we've had some good success. It feels good. But what we find is one of the greatest impediments for our youth is that they're living in unsafe or insecure housing. And that's an impediment. So, you know, there's many youth, as you've heard today, people talk about it, but I just say that they're functionally homeless. You know, they move from place to place. The place where they live isn't safe. Their family gets evicted. You know, and so what can happen is we can help people get into school, into college, and then all of a sudden something happens, and then they're gone. And then they've lost everything. So what we've realized is we need to have housing as a component to help people take where they're going and move forward. And so we have this idea, which we haven't started. So or we have started, I'm going to tell you in a minute, but as I've listened today, I've just felt like if any of you are overwhelmed in this room by what you heard, I don't blame you. So, I mean, what you've heard today is a lot of information, and myself and my colleague Sean, who's with me, we're wading through it. But what's exciting is that the Catholic, our churches in Camden are merging, and so we just acquired an old convent, a 13-bedroom convent, that we're going to renovate with some funding from the state, and we're naming it the Crib, okay, for community responding and belief. So, and all those other fun things that we have. And it's going to be a place where young people who are in college can live, but they can live together as an intentional community of support. So as you heard some of those models before, that yeah, people want independent, like apartment-style housing, that our youth want to be able to live together to support each other. And we ourselves are going to be the supporting agency. So it's a little bit different model in that, like as you heard, like Seth's group provides the housing, and you, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Bob group provide the supportive services, and they come together. How we're doing it is we're providing both of those because we're going to integrate them together. Now that's just a different model. But we're very excited by that because what we believe is going to happen is we're going to create a group of youth who are successful, who already are successful, will be more successful, but they're going to come back with the other youth who are coming into our program and be mentors and examples and that kind of stuff. I guess that's all I have to say. We're getting our building, and we hope to begin fixing our building. We're going to rehab our building in May, and we hope to have it completed in September, October. But that's my schedule. Everybody else who does housing says it's longer. I'm always optimistic.
Stick with yours.
Okay, yeah, thank you. But I guess what I just want to say is that it's just, I find that the partnerships are so important, and the partnerships of faith with the faith communities. I think there could be all sorts more things that we could do as those three congregations. And, you know, I could talk to you a lot about how that's been both good and bad, and it goes up and down, and it depends on who's the pastor and where the congregations are. And, you know, the church that I began at now has been merged with another church. And so there's a lot of stuff in faith communities that you have to deal with, you know. So doing it with more than one community, that's just part of it. But it's how life is in Camden. And so, you know, you have to kind of get in. And the last thing I just want to say is, I don't know anything about housing. But when I began, I didn't know anything about technology either. And so our motto is learning to learn. And so what I would just really encourage everyone here is that if you're rooted in your mission and your faith, then the rest will come. And that's what we found. You know, you don't need to be a great, supportive, understanding housing person with all the knowledge and all that. We have great experts, who are willing to help us. I think the most important thing is to be rooted in our mission and why we do it. You know, and that's what energizes us. Not, you know, and I think a mission is different. I believe it's different than just doing what's right. Because I think mission is about having a relationship with God and Jesus, That for me. So, and that's what motivates us, and that's what makes us have to go to the zoning board meeting or find the connections we need and that kind of stuff. And then we partner with the state, who is about doing right, which is great. But our energy comes from our faith. And I think if you're connected to that, then that's a very exciting thing for any place and any group. So that's all I have to say. But I mean, you know, have more.
I'd like to take 2 minutes to, one, have your questions asked to these two, and then also this would be a moment if somebody has an idea of something that you've been dreaming about on your own church property. If you just kind of stand in faith and say what the idea is, and we'll all yell amen. And we won't go into more detail, but we'll yell amen as part of that, you know, helping you get excited.
Just a quick question for Father Shepard from New Brunswick. The young people who are going to form the community, are they what you would consider to be members of your congregation, or are they people that you have brought off to the streets and mentored into jobs and life?
No, they're people from camp. I mean, it's not congregation specific. So the way it has worked is that congregations, all 3 congregations, can make use of HopeWorks. It's a nonprofit, a 501c3. But what's really exciting is how youth get to HopeWorks. A lot of youth get to HopeWorks through youth recruiting, youth attraction. So when someone gets there and has a good experience, they bring in another youth. So we attract all sorts of youth.
So they can come from different positions? And
absolutely, except for the Reformed tradition. Oh, I mean, no, I did it. Yeah. But no, everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome. Oh.
Alice Abner, and I am working on a project with my daughter. She lives in Philly, and she is working with ex-offenders, housing for those individuals who come out of the rehabs and et cetera from the prison system. So I just asked me, so this is your prayers. I've been up all night working on the project with her, and it's a joy to actually work with her because I have worked in transitional housing programs before, and with my expertise and with the help of God, we hope to have this in place very, very soon.
Yeah.
Let's say thanks to God together. Thanks be to God. Other questions? Yeah, Doug?
One of the reasons why I was interested and excited about what you were saying, Father Jeff, and I think it's probably time to say to tell the classes this. I think all of you know the Second Reformed in New Brunswick is not one of the wealthiest congregations in the classes, but we are very property wealthy. And what we have decided to do, beginning this June, is that we are establishing a Christian community in the second floor of what is now Affinity House. We'll be doing that in conjunction with students at the seminary, as well as students from Rutgers University. They will be living in community and beginning the social ministries of Second Reformed Church. Food pantry, clothing pantry, after-school programming, and mentoring. They will be getting their housing as part of the ministry, but it's a way that we can bring the needed staff to do ministry in our contacts with the resource that we already have. Yeah. And I think that the possibilities of that came out this past week when I met with Trinity House staff. They said, what would happen if we just simply tore this building down and build a huge building and house all the people for all different ministries in the area? So the beginnings of new dreams comes from just simple uses of resources that you have. And it's an exciting place to be.
I want to just say,
people of God said, Thanks be to God.
I just want to say, I want to connect with that because one of the things that we're intentionally doing is creating a youth community, an intentional community. And I think that's actually quite a countercultural thing to do in Camden, where in general, where you hear things like, stay out of my business, you're disrespecting me if you're asking me stuff. And it was said a little bit earlier about allowing people to have a chance to experience a supportive community. And I think in Camden, it's one of the things that's so missing is how we can care for each other. Not because Camden is not full of caring people, but it's creating the sense of community, and that community is incredibly difficult within the poverty and the violence that goes on. And so it's not just housing, but it's housing for something. It's a means to something bigger. And I think that is going to be quite powerful for not only the youth who are there, but for other people to participate in. So,
if I can, I would like to touch on that. As a developer, again, and being faith-based, I think this is an easier accomplishment. But when we went into Camden, and again, our office is right next to Father Jeff's, the reality is that we were met with such resistance, even being a faith-based organization, because we weren't part of that community and we didn't have the history. At the end of the day, what we learned from that as a developer is that we held truly a number, over the course of about 18 months, of community meetings, not just with ourselves as the church, who was going then to be the managing agent of 89 scattered site single-family homes for low-income families, but we also then brought in HMFA, who was the largest supporter financially of this program, the council, the mayor, Father Jeff's group, Reverend Margaret, who he referenced earlier. I have to tell you, at the end of the day, really what it came down to was trust. And really, as churches, you have the ultimate power, being able to reach out into your communities, establish the trust, can do the education for those that are weary, and to be able to say it will work, and to really walk individuals through the process. And the individuals, again, aren't just within your own congregation, but it is that greater community.
Preach it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Peg, how many, I don't know the size and scope of your agency, but is building housing in connection with churches something that's been going on a long time? And just give us a sense of how many projects are there.
Currently, we have a housing portfolio, as well as supportive services housing, an adoption program, which again we link with churches, and an immigration and refugee program out of Trenton. Again, that's church affiliated out of Trenton. We roughly serve about 3,000, almost 4,000 clients per year. The connection with churches really almost throughout all of our portfolio, I would say, is a good probably 80%. At the end of the day, we work with churches, not just Lutheran churches, to really hopefully fulfill their mission and their vision for what they would like to develop, because I think we understand that there is the common theme of church and God and expectation. Again, though, I have to say, though, as churches and then as a developer, the most important thing for you as church leaders when you sit and you choose a developer is making sure that you don't lose the vision and your mission because of the development entity that you choose. I mean, that is, and that can happen along the course of the way. And we, again, as a developer, even though we've partnered with non-faith groups, have to keep reminding those that provide sometimes the social services support that this is the church mission, this is our mission, this is our vision, and how critical it is that that theme start from the very beginning of the first meeting as a church to the very end of when that project opens. I don't know if that helps anybody.
One last question. Nancy.
Without being negative, how do you prevent disasters that happen? Gloucester, Massachusetts had a wonderful plan for low-income housing mixed. It fell flat on its face because of poor planning, because of all sorts of factors. They just could not mix populations. How do you prevent that?
I'll tell you, it's interesting. Right now I'm reading a book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And one of the chapters discusses, you know, many times we are so focused on the success of a project. Many times the success of a project might be knowing that you shouldn't proceed forward. And at what point? And I don't want that to sound negative, like you just throw up your arms and say, okay, just because you hit a few roadblocks. But at the end of the day, I think, hopefully, as developers, you recognize what is real, what the realities are, or will it be a train wreck and just crash and burn? Again, I think that you probably, it's through, again, I think through communication, keeping the lines of communication and really recognizing political agendas that may be involved in programs of whatever. And at the day, you need to have strong leadership and know, I guess, sometimes whose door to knock on with a lot of prayer to get to that end result. And not all will be successes, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean that then it can't be done, but then it may be done just in a different municipality sometimes.
And I want to add to that in light of the Super Bowl. You know, I think I like to go long. I like to pass long. But what I've realized in my work in Camden is that I have to run a ground game, and that sometimes it's about, if this works for people who know football, it's about field position, 3 and out, move the ball, get the ball back. And, you know, I think I've had to learn and appreciate that I came from a class and a position in society where going long was somewhat easy. And so as you think about your projects, you know, that's there. That, you know, it might be like things have been able to work just like this. And what Camden for me has been about has been kind of working with that, my own sense, and also learning that it's about a discipline and about 3 steps forward, 1 step back. I mean, that's somewhat just a prudent thing, but I've also learned it's a part of me. Like, that's a new thing I've had to learn, you know, because of who I was and where I grew up and how I was. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but it's just interesting because, you know, we all want to put it right in the end zone, you know, in 2 months. If you have that game plan, this program's not for you. But you still can get in the end zone.
I would just add, as Peg's talking about developers, one thing we didn't anticipate when we built Arena Court is that by the end of building Arena Court, our agency, Reformed Church of Highland Park Affordable Housing Corporation, would decide to become a developer. But that's what we now are. Is we are not only managing Arena Court, where we want to be a developer that partners with another developer to make sure that it doesn't lose the dream, the focus, the vision. So what we did is we partnered with an agency called Reeds Corporation, and Reeds hired somebody specifically to do the projects that we suggest to them. So that person functions really as the executive director of our development agency, our development team. So it's just one way to kind of make sure that that vision remains a church vision, a faith-based vision, and it seems to be working out well. We're just, you know, getting rolling with this, but you know, I hope that anybody who wants to, you know, talk to Peg about being the developer for projects, you can also talk to us about how that might work, you know, or how you can create your own development agency too. But Fran Shell is here, and just as we close in prayer, Fran, would you just come up? Fran is the matriarch of the Reformed Church of Highland Park, and Fran has never been a naysayer about anything, but when Peg was saying there may be naysayers, the only time I ever heard Fran naysay was the day, come on up, the day that I first suggested putting housing on the church roof, which she was furious with me. I mean, I thought she was going to drag me right out of the church, and I mean physically, we had a little run-in. And within a couple of weeks, Fran was the biggest advocate, well, a couple of months, but she became the key to our board and really the spiritual center of moving the congregation forward. And it was by, you know, I like to go long, you know, like you're saying, and Fran made me run a ground game, and first run aground, and then run a ground game. But Fran, really, I just say this, you know, I'm going to ask her to close us here, just as we sing the doxology, that really, you know, having the Fran in your church get excited about caring for others in radical new ways is just about the most important thing you can do spiritually for everybody involved. But Fran, you wanted to say a word about arena coordinating, but you told me on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to.
Sure did, I didn't know. I'd worn something dressier. I was really angry when he was starting this. He was telling me the truth about it. But when I found out they were going to take people in that had been in foster care, and when they were 18, they had to leave that. And so I was all for that 100%. Because I've been in this church, well, I started there when I was 10 years old, and I'm 89, so you can imagine how long I've been in the chair, the church, I mean. But it's working out beautifully. I wish you all could come over and see what we have done up there. If you're ever in Highland Park, please stop and see. We have 6 happy young ladies up there, and a nice room for each one of them. And I think we can do a lot more with this because we're going to try, aren't we?
Absolutely.
And you're right. I forgive you.
The doxology together? Yeah.
All you have to do is change the word from he to God.
Okay. All right. Can we keep Father, Son, and Holy Spirit?
That's all.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's fun. It went through my mind, but I didn't know how you changed the last three. So let's join in the doxology, and we'll do the inclusive version. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise God, all creatures here below. Praise God above the heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Thank you to all of the speakers who shared with us and given us your Saturday. It was one thing for us to come out here, but for you, that's that much extra to know that you love and care about our church.